The invitation. John sat in his small lab, surrounded by beeping machines and stacks of research papers. The room smelled of stale coffee and ambition. For months, he had been studying signals from deep space, hoping to uncover some sign of intelligent life. But every day, the signals were the same, static, meaningless patterns. He was about to pack up for the night when a sudden sharp tone echoed from his receiver. It wasn't static. It wasn't random. It was a signal. He froze, his heart racing as he adjusted the dials. The signal became clearer, and then, to his shock, words appeared on his screen. Not just any words, words in English. "Greetings, John Carter." The message read, "You are invited to the grand banquet of the Galactic Council. An experience beyond your imagination awaits you." John blinked, certain he was dreaming. Who could send such a message? Was it some elaborate prank? But then, the screen flickered, and a small golden card materialized on his desk, seemingly out of thin air. He picked it up cautiously. It was warm to the touch, and strange symbols danced across its surface before transforming into readable text. "This card grants you passage to the stars. Your presence is requested as a guest of honor." He stared at the card, his mind racing. A guest of honor. Him. He was just a scientist, not a diplomat or a hero. Why would aliens invite him to something so grand? The next day, John tried to convince himself it was a hallucination or a trick. But when he placed the card on his desk, a holographic image projected into the air. It showed a sleek, silver spacecraft hovering just outside Earth's orbit. A deep voice echoed through the room. "Your transport awaits, John Carter. The Council eagerly anticipates your arrival." Before he could think, the card began to glow, and a beam of light surrounded him. His lab disappeared in a flash, and he found himself standing in a brightly lit room. The walls shimmered like liquid silver, and an alien with long, elegant limbs and skin like polished jade stood before him. "Welcome," the alien said, its voice calm and soothing. "I am Kareth, your guide. You are one of the few chosen to attend the Galactic Council's grand banquet." John stammered, "Why me? I'm just a scientist. What could I possibly offer?" Kareth smiled, showing rows of perfectly white teeth. "The Council values those who seek knowledge. You represent humanity, one of the youngest but most curious species in the galaxy. Your courage to explore the unknown has caught their attention." Despite Kareth's polite tone, John couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than he was being told, but his curiosity overpowered his doubt. After all, how many people could say they had been invited to dine with aliens? The spacecraft was a marvel. It glided silently through the cosmos, its walls lined with windows that offered breathtaking views of stars and nebula. Other beings were aboard, each more bizarre and fascinating than the last. There was a creature made entirely of light, a towering figure with crystalline skin, and a small furry alien with 8 arms that waved at John enthusiastically. "You are the human," the furry alien said, waddling up to him. Its voice was high-pitched but friendly. "We've heard much about your kind. So resourceful, so adaptable." John hesitated. "Thank you, I think." The alien chuckled, its 8 eyes twinkling. "Oh, you'll be the star of the banquet, I'm sure of it." The words unsettled him. He looked around, noticing that some of the other guests avoided his gaze. Whispers rippled through the room, too faint for him to hear. Were they talking about him? He felt a pang of unease, but quickly brushed it aside. This was an opportunity of a lifetime, and he wasn't going to let paranoia ruin it. As the ship approached its destination, Kareth appeared again. "Prepare yourself, John Carter. We are about to land." John's breath caught as he saw the planet below. It was unlike anything he had ever imagined. Its surface shimmered like a giant pearl, with rivers of glowing light weaving through lush alien forests. A massive palace stood at the center, its spires reaching into the heavens. The ship landed smoothly, and the doors opened with a soft hiss. A path of floating lights led them to the palace, where a grand hall awaited. The air was filled with a sweet, intoxicating scent, and music that seemed to resonate with his very soul played softly in the background. John felt a mix of awe and apprehension. He was about to step into a world no human had ever seen. But as he walked through the towering doors of the palace, he couldn't shake the words of the furry alien. "You'll be the star of the banquet." What did that mean? And why did it send a chill down his spine? The journey. The spacecraft hummed with a soothing energy, gliding effortlessly through the cosmos. John sat in a plush seat, his gaze fixed on the massive viewport in front of him. Stars blurred into streaks of light as the ship traveled faster than anything he had ever imagined. The sight was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. He had to remind himself to breathe. Seated around him were other honored guests, each a representative of their own world. Their appearances ranged from fascinating to unsettling. Across from him sat a creature with translucent skin, its internal organs pulsating faintly in an intricate rhythm. Beside it was a tall figure made of what looked like flowing liquid metal, constantly shifting form, but somehow remaining humanoid. John cleared his throat, trying to ease the awkward silence. "So, where is everyone from?" he asked, hoping to spark conversation. The translucent alien turned its eyeless head toward him. Its voice was like a gentle whisper in his mind. "I am from the Andar Nebula. We are honored to be here, though not without caution." John furrowed his brow. "Caution? What do you mean?" Before the alien could respond, the liquid metal being emitted a low, vibrating sound that might have been a laugh. "The Andarians always worry too much. They fear everything that moves. This is an occasion for celebration, not suspicion." The Andarian's glow dimmed slightly, a sign of displeasure. Celebration, yes, but one must always question why one is invited. Not all gifts are given freely. John shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The conversation had taken a strange turn, and the cryptic nature of their words wasn't helping his nerves. He glanced toward the far end of the room, where Xerox, his guide, stood silently, observing the guests. Xerox's calm demeanor was reassuring, but John couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing in his chest. Moments later, the ship slowed, and the stars outside returned to their usual stillness. "We are approaching the grand banquet hall," Xerox announced, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Prepare yourselves to witness the splendor of the Galactic Council's finest hospitality." The ship descended toward a glowing planet, its surface a swirling mix of vibrant colors. It looked alive, constantly shifting like a living organism. As they neared, John spotted the banquet hall, a magnificent structure of shimmering crystal that seemed to float above a vast ocean of liquid light. Towering spires reached toward the sky, and bridges of glowing energy connected the structure to smaller floating islands. A collective gasp filled the room as the guests marveled at the sight. Even the Andarian, who had been so wary earlier, seemed momentarily entranced. The ship docked smoothly, and Xerox gestured for everyone to follow. "This way, please. The council awaits." As they stepped off the ship, a cool breeze greeted them, carrying an intoxicating fragrance that made John feel lightheaded. The path to the hall was lined with glowing orbs that floated gently in the air, illuminating their way. The other guests began to converse softly, their earlier tension replaced by awe and curiosity. John fell into step beside the furry alien he had seen earlier, a small round creature with 8 eyes and a tail that twitched constantly. The alien looked up at him and grinned. "First time human." Yeah," John replied, forcing a smile. "You?" The alien chuckled. "Third time. But this one's different. Much bigger than before. More grand." "Different how?" John asked, his curiosity piqued. The alien's grin faltered for a moment, but it quickly recovered. "Oh, nothing to worry about. Just enjoy the moment. Trust me, the food is worth it." The words should have been comforting, but they weren't. If anything, they only deepened John's sense of unease. They entered the banquet hall, and John was struck by its sheer grandeur. The ceiling was a dome of transparent crystal, offering an unobstructed view of the swirling sky above. Tables floated in midair, each one adorned with dishes that glowed faintly, as if alive. Alien music, haunting and beautiful, filled the air, resonating deep within John's chest. His rocks guided him to his assigned seat, positioned near the center of the room. The table was long and ornate, surrounded by beings of every shape and size. Some shimmered like ghosts, others radiated heat like miniature suns. The diversity was breathtaking. "Please, take your seats," Saurox announced. "The banquet will commence shortly." John settled into his chair, his eyes darting around the room. The other guests seemed relaxed, even excited, but John couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. Whispers floated through the air, too faint for him to make out, but their tone felt ominous. A gong sounded, and the hall fell silent. At the head of the room stood the host, a towering alien with golden skin that seemed to ripple like water. Its presence commanded attention, and its smile was wide and toothy, but not entirely comforting. "Honored guests," the host began, its voice resonating like a melody. "Tonight, we celebrate unity. Tonight, we feast together as one galaxy, one family. Each of you has been chosen for your unique contributions, your remarkable qualities. This is a night to remember." The guests applauded politely, but John noticed a few uneasy glances exchanged between them. He couldn't help but wonder what the host meant by remarkable qualities. As the applause died down, the host's smile grew wider. "But before the feast begins, allow me to express my gratitude to our most esteemed guest. A species so new, so curious, so flavorful." The host's gaze locked onto John, and his blood ran cold. "Welcome, human. You are the highlight of tonight's banquet." The banquet hall. The Grand Banquet Hall was a masterpiece of alien architecture, a symphony of colors and forms that defied gravity and logic. The walls shimmered with a living light, and the ceiling above seemed to stretch infinitely into a cosmos of stars. Floating platforms held tables laden with dishes that glowed, steamed, or pulsated rhythmically. The air was filled with a soft, ethereal hum, as if the hall itself was alive and breathing. John stepped cautiously into the room, his eyes wide as he took in the scene. Every seat was filled with creatures from across the galaxy, some humanoid, others unrecognizable in form. A gelatinous being with hundreds of flickering eyes jiggled excitedly next to a towering plant-like alien whose petals emitted a soft glow. At the center of the room, a grand table hovered above the floor, supported by beams of pure energy. It was set with ornate golden plates and crystal goblets, filled with liquid that shimmered like molten silver. Xerox guided John to his assigned seat, positioned near the center of the table, close to the host's end. "You must feel honored," Xerox said, his voice calm but his smile unsettling. "This seat is reserved for the most distinguished guest." John sat down hesitantly, acutely aware of the eyes on him. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. He glanced at the other guests seated nearby, hoping for some sense of camaraderie, but their expressions ranged from uneasy to downright nervous. As John adjusted himself in his seat, a spherical drone floated down from above, its surface covered in blinking lights. It hovered in front of him, emitting a soft chime. "Human Representative John Carter," it announced in a cheerful tone. "Your presence is greatly appreciated. The Council acknowledges your contributions to humanity's knowledge of the cosmos." The words felt rehearsed, almost too polished, and John forced a polite smile. Thank you. It's an honor to be here." The drone hummed in response and zipped away, leaving John feeling exposed. He turned to the guest on his right, a reptilian alien with scales that glimmered like diamonds. "Is this your first banquet?" John asked, trying to break the ice. The alien's slitted eyes flicked toward him. It hesitated before responding, its voice a deep rasp. My first, and perhaps my last. Before John could ask what it meant, the room fell silent. A deep gong resonated, and the host appeared at the far end of the hall. It was taller than any creature John had seen, its golden skin shimmering like molten metal. Its elongated limbs moved with grace, and its eyes glowed with an intensity that made John's stomach twist. The host raised its arms, and the soft hum of the hall grew louder, resonating in John's chest. Welcome, honored guests, it said, its voice melodic yet commanding. Tonight, we celebrate not just our diversity, but our unity. Across the stars, we come together to share in this sacred feast. The guests clapped, some with enthusiasm, others with reluctance. The host's gaze swept across the room, pausing briefly on John. Its smile widened, showing sharp, crystalline teeth. Each of you has been chosen for your unique qualities, the host continued. But tonight, one among us shines brighter than the rest, a being whose kind is rare and intriguing, a symbol of curiosity and resilience. The host gestured toward John, and the spotlight shifted to him. A collective gasp rippled through the room. John froze, his palms sweating. John Carter of Earth, the host announced. You are the highlight of this evening. Your species is young, but your potential is remarkable. A wave of applause filled the hall, though it felt hesitant, almost forced. John managed a weak smile, but his mind raced. Why was he the highlight? What did they mean by remarkable potential? He felt like a specimen under a microscope, the center of attention in a way that was both flattering and deeply unsettling. The applause faded, and the host clapped its hands. Let the feast begin. Servants appeared from nowhere, gliding silently as they placed dishes on the tables. The food was unlike anything John had ever seen. One platter held glowing orbs that floated slightly above the surface. Another carried steaming chunks of meat that shimmered as if coated in stardust. The scents were intoxicating, making his stomach rumble despite his nerves. John glanced at the other guests, hoping to see them digging in, but many hesitated, exchanging wary glances. The reptilian alien beside him leaned closer and whispered, Do not eat too eagerly, human. The banquet is not what it seems. John's pulse quickened. What do you mean? He whispered back. The reptilian's eyes flicked toward the host, then back to John. Observe. Ask questions, but do not trust their smiles. John's unease deepened as he watched the host raise a goblet, signaling the first toast. The guests reluctantly followed suit, lifting their drinks. Xerox appeared behind John, leaning close to his ear. Enjoy the feast, honored guest, Xerox said, his tone smooth but ominous. After all, this night is all about you. John felt the weight of the words settle in his chest. As the first course was served, the room erupted in conversation and laughter. But John couldn't shake the growing sense of dread. Something was very, very wrong. The truth unfolds. The banquet was in full swing, with laughter and strange, melodic music filling the air. Plates piled high with alien delicacies floated effortlessly between the guests, who sampled the food with enthusiasm, or, in some cases, hesitation. John, however, couldn't bring himself to take a bite. Every time he reached for something, Xerox or another attendant would glance his way, their smiles sharp and lingering. Something wasn't right. As he sat there, John couldn't help but notice the subtle tension among the guests. The Andarian, who had earlier spoken of caution, had barely touched its food. The reptilian beside John was silently observing the room, its fork untouched. Even the lively, eight-eyed furry alien now seemed subdued, nervously glancing at the host. John leaned toward the reptilian alien. What's going on here? Why does everyone look so uneasy? The reptilian turned its head slowly, its slitted eyes narrowing. You still don't understand, do you, human? John's chest tightened. Understand what? Before the alien could answer, a soft chime rang out. and the room fell silent. The host rose from its seat, towering over the guests. Its golden skin glowed faintly in the dim light, casting an eerie shimmer across the room. "My esteemed guests," the host began, its voice smooth and commanding. "As we enjoy this feast, let us reflect on what makes this gathering so special. Tonight, we do not merely share food and drink. We share our cultures, our histories, and our most cherished traditions." The guests clapped politely, but the unease in the room was palpable. John's pulse quickened as he watched the host's glowing eyes scan the table. When those eyes landed on him, he felt like a deer caught in headlights. "Our honored human guest," the host continued, its smile widening, "is a symbol of Earth's spirit, resilient, curious, and full of potential. But humanity is more than just potential. It is exquisite." The word hung in the air like a blade. John's stomach churned. He glanced around the table, hoping someone would share in his confusion or speak up. Instead, most of the guests avoided his gaze, their expressions ranging from pity to fear. The host gestured toward one of the attendants, who stepped forward carrying a covered platter. The dome-shaped lid lifted with a flourish, revealing a dish that made John's blood run cold. It was a perfectly prepared cut of meat, pink and glistening, garnished with alien herbs. But what sent a chill down his spine was the unmistakable shape of a human rib. The room seemed to tilt as realization struck. John pushed back his chair, his breath coming in shallow gasps. What is this?" he stammered, his voice barely audible over the pounding in his ears. The host's smile didn't waver. "This, dear John, is the highlight of our feast. You see, every banquet honors a species by celebrating its most unique qualities. For humanity, that quality is flavor." The words hit John like a punch to the gut. He stumbled to his feet, his mind racing. "You're eating humans," he shouted, his voice echoing through the hall. "That's what this is." Gasps rippled through the room, but no one came to his defense. The host's golden skin seemed to shimmer more brightly as it regarded him with an unsettling calm. "Do not misunderstand, John. This is not barbaric. This is reverence. To be consumed is the highest honor in our culture. You are not just our guest. You are the centerpiece of this sacred tradition." John's heart pounded as he looked around the room, searching for an ally. The reptilian alien leaned closer, speaking quickly and quietly. "Now you see why I warned you. You are the main course, human. If you wish to live, you must act fast." John's instincts screamed at him to run, but where? The hall was vast, and the exits were guarded by attendants who now watched him with predatory smiles. His eyes darted to the Andarian, whose translucent body pulsed faintly. "Help me," John mouthed to the Andarian, who hesitated before giving the faintest nod. The host stepped forward, raising its arms to quiet the murmurs in the room. "Do not fear, John Carter. Your sacrifice will be remembered for generations. This is an honor no human has ever received." John clenched his fists, anger and fear bubbling to the surface. "I didn't agree to this. You lied to me." The host tilted its head, as if puzzled by John's outrage. "Lies? No. We invited you with honesty. You accepted willingly. And now, the feast must proceed." The attendants began to close in, their movements slow but deliberate. John's mind raced as he searched for a way out. His eyes fell on the centerpiece of the table, a glowing orb that seemed to pulse with energy. He had seen it earlier, but now it struck him as something more than mere decoration. Could it be a power source, a weapon? The Andarian's voice echoed in his mind. "The orb, it controls the hall's systems. If you destroy it, you might create enough chaos to escape." John took a deep breath, his hands trembling. He had no time to think, no time to plan. His survival instinct took over, and he lunged for the orb. Escape or accept. The hall erupted into chaos as John stood frozen, his eyes darting between the predatory smiles of the attendants and the glowing orb at the center of the table. The host's golden skin rippled with what might have been amusement or malice. "You misunderstand, John Carter," the host said, its voice calm yet piercing. "This is not a choice. This is destiny." John's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. The exits were guarded, the attendants' sharp smiles growing wider as they closed in. The guests around the table looked away, unwilling to meet his eyes. They wouldn't help. They wouldn't dare. Destiny. John spat, his voice trembling but defiant. "You expect me to just lie down and let you eat me? I don't think so." The host's smile faltered, and its glowing eyes narrowed. "You dare reject the highest honor we can bestow?" John didn't answer. His eyes flicked to the glowing orb at the table's center. It pulsed rhythmically, sending faint waves of energy through the air. The Andarian's whispered warning replayed in his mind. The orb. Destroy it. Summoning every ounce of courage, John lunged for the orb. The host's calm demeanor shattered in an instant. "Stop him!" It roared, its voice echoing like thunder. The attendants reacted quickly, but not quickly enough. John grabbed the orb, its surface warm and vibrating under his fingers. A surge of energy shot through his arm, making him grit his teeth. He didn't know what he was doing. He just knew this was his only chance. "Let go, human," Xerox hissed, reaching for him. John twisted the orb violently, and a sharp crack split the air. The pulsing light inside flickered erratically, and the entire hall seemed to shudder. The soft hum that had filled the space suddenly grew louder, deeper, until it became an ominous rumble. The host's golden skin darkened, and its once calm expression contorted with rage. "You fool! Do you have any idea what you've done?" "No," John said, panting, "but I'm betting it's better than being dinner." The orb emitted a blinding flash, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When the light faded, the hall's floating tables and platforms began to destabilize, wobbling in midair. Guests screamed as dishes toppled, and the once majestic banquet dissolved into chaos. Seizing the moment, John bolted toward the nearest exit. The guards moved to intercept him, but the Andarian stepped in their path, its translucent body glowing with fierce intensity. "Go, human," it shouted telepathically. "We will buy you time." John hesitated for a fraction of a second, stunned by the Andarian's bravery, before nodding and sprinting away. Behind him, the Andarian unleashed a blinding flash of light, temporarily stunning the guards. The corridors outside the banquet hall were a labyrinth of twisting, shimmering pathways. John ran blindly, his heart pounding in his ears. He could hear the host's enraged voice echoing through the ship's intercom system. "Capture the human. He must not leave this planet." John's lungs burned as he turned corner after corner, his mind racing. He needed a plan, a way off this floating death trap. Ahead, he spotted a smaller alien, one of the servants, fiddling with a control panel. The creature looked up in alarm as John approached, its 3 eyes blinking rapidly. "Please, don't hurt me," it squeaked, raising its hands. John skidded to a halt, panting. "I won't. Just tell me how to get off this ship." The alien hesitated, its gaze darting around nervously. "There's an escape pod bay down that corridor," it said, pointing to a glowing pathway. "But the pods are locked. You'll need a key." John cursed under his breath. "Where's the key?" The alien hesitated again, then sighed. "The overseer carries it. Xerox." John's stomach dropped. Of course, it had to be Xerox. "Great," he muttered. "Any chance you've got a backup plan?" The alien's 3 eyes blinked in unison. "Well, there is one thing. If you overload the core in the control room, it will trigger a ship-wide evacuation. But it's risky." John nodded, already turning back toward the chaos of the banquet hall. "Risky's better than dead. Thanks." As he retraced his steps, John's mind raced. The control room had to be near the center of the ship. If he could get there, he might have a chance to create enough of a distraction to escape, but the host and its attendants wouldn't let him go without a fight. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with Xerox, who stood blocking his path. The alien's serene expression was gone, replaced by cold fury. "You should have accepted your fate," Xerox hissed. "Now you've made things worse for everyone." John didn't hesitate. He swung the cracked orb like a club, catching Xerox off guard. The alien stumbled, and John darted past, adrenaline fueling his every step. The control room was a gleaming chamber filled with holographic displays and blinking lights. In the center was a towering console with a glowing core, pulsating with energy. John didn't know what half the controls did, but he didn't care. He slammed his fists onto the console, searching for anything that looked like an override. Alarms blared as the core's glow intensified. A computerized voice filled the room. "Warning. Core destabilization imminent. All personnel, evacuate immediately." The floor trembled beneath John's feet as the ship began to shut down. He sprinted toward the escape pod bay, dodging panicked aliens along the way. His heart soared when he saw the pods, sleek, egg-shaped vessels glowing faintly in the dim light. But Xerox was waiting for him, its figure illuminated by the flickering lights. "You think you can escape, human? You're nothing but prey." John didn't answer. He grabbed a nearby metal rod and faced Xerox, his eyes blazing with determination. "I might be prey," he said, his voice steady, "but I'm not going down without a fight." The chase. The alarms blared louder, a deafening wail that echoed through the ship. Red lights strobed along the corridors, casting eerie shadows on the walls. John sprinted down the twisting pathways, his heart pounding like a drum. Behind him, the host's voice boomed over the intercom. "Seal the exits. Do not let the human escape." The walls seemed to close in around him as the attendants pursued him with relentless precision. Their elongated limbs and swift, spider-like movements made them faster than he'd anticipated. Every time he glanced back, they were closer, silent, and menacing, their glowing eyes locked onto him. John skidded around a corner and stumbled into what appeared to be a cargo bay. Crates floated in midair, tethered by faint beams of energy. He ducked behind one, gasping for breath, and tried to steady his shaking hands. The faint sound of the attendant's movements grew louder, closer. "Think, John. Think." His eyes darted around the room, searching for anything he could use. His gaze landed on a console embedded into the wall. Above it, a series of holographic screens displayed a map of the ship. One section blinked with the words "Evacuation Bay." "That's my way out," he muttered, glancing at the distance on the map. It wasn't far, but getting there meant crossing several open corridors and avoiding the creatures hunting him. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and John knew he had to move. Staying low, he crept toward the console and tapped the screen. A soft beep confirmed his location, and he memorized the shortest route to the evacuation bay. As he turned to leave, a loud crash shattered the silence. One of the attendants had spotted him, its sharp claws slicing through the crate he'd just been hiding behind. It screeched, its voice a high-pitched wail that sent shivers down his spine. "There he is," another attendant hissed, its glowing eyes narrowing. John bolted, weaving through the floating crates as the attendants closed in. One of them leaped, its claws grazing his shoulder, but he managed to slip away, adrenaline numbing the pain. He darted through the cargo bay doors and slammed his hand on the panel, triggering the lock. The heavy door sealed shut just as the attendants reached it, their screeches muffled on the other side. John didn't have time to rest. He pushed forward, following the glowing path displayed on his wristband, an emergency navigation tool he'd swiped from the console. The ship trembled beneath his feet, a sign that his sabotage of the core was working. The host's voice crackled over the intercom again, colder and more menacing this time. "Your defiance will be your undoing, human. You think you can escape, but there is no corner of this galaxy where you will be safe." John ignored the threat, his focus razor-sharp. He turned another corner and found himself in a vast, open corridor lined with glowing panels. The evacuation bay was just ahead, but so were more attendants. They stood between him and the pods, their silhouettes illuminated by the flickering lights. John's heart sank. He couldn't outrun them, not with this many in his path. His fingers brushed against the cracked orb he had taken earlier, the one that had destabilized the banquet hall. Its glow had dimmed, but it still pulsed faintly with energy. He didn't know what it would do, but it was his only option. Gripping the orb tightly, John stepped into the corridor. The attendants turned toward him, their movements predatory. One of them hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "You won't make it, human." John smirked, though his hands trembled. "Watch me." He hurled the orb toward the nearest group of attendants. The moment it hit the ground, a blinding flash erupted, followed by a shockwave that sent them flying. The energy distorted the air, creating a temporary barrier between John and the rest of the pursuers. Taking advantage of the chaos, John sprinted toward the evacuation bay. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing rows of escape pods. Each one glowed softly, their sleek designs promising salvation. He rushed to the nearest pod and slammed his hand on the activation panel. The pod's door slid open, and a soothing voice greeted him. "Welcome, passenger," preparing for immediate launch. John climbed inside, his body aching and his mind racing. As the door sealed shut, he saw Xerox appear at the entrance to the bay, its glowing eyes burning with fury. "You cannot escape," Xerox roared, pounding on the pod's exterior. "You will never outrun us." The pod shuddered as the launch sequence began. Xerox's furious gaze was the last thing John saw before the pod shot out of the bay like a bullet, hurtling into the endless void of space. The sudden silence was almost deafening. John leaned back in the pod seat, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. The ship loomed in the viewport, its golden glow fading as it drifted further away. Explosions rippled across its surface, a chain reaction from the sabotaged core. John watched as the ship began to break apart, fragments scattering into the darkness. He felt a grim sense of satisfaction. They had underestimated him, fought him weak, fought him prey. But he had survived. He was alive. As the pod's navigation system locked onto Earth's coordinates, John allowed himself a small, bitter laugh. He had escaped the banquet, but he knew this was far from over. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had just made its first enemies. "Let them come," John muttered, staring into the endless stars. "We'll be ready. Humanity strikes back." John's escape pod streaked through the void like a shooting star, leaving the shattered remains of the alien banquet ship behind. The silence inside the pod was almost suffocating, but his mind was anything but quiet. The events of the past hours replayed in vivid, jarring fragments, the host's chilling smile, the ominous whispers of the other guests, and the revelation that he was meant to be the centerpiece of their grotesque honor. His hands trembled as he gripped the pod's control panel. A single thought burned in his mind. They won't stop. They'll come for me. And for Earth. The pod's navigation system crackled to life, approaching Earth's orbit. Estimated time of arrival, 14 minutes. John leaned forward, his reflection in the glass viewport pale and hollow-eyed. He couldn't let this end here. The Galactic Council wasn't just a group of advanced beings. They were predators, and humanity was now on their menu. John had to warn Earth, but more than that, he had to prepare them to fight back. As the pod entered Earth's atmosphere, a team of aerospace researchers detected its descent. By the time John's pod landed in a barren stretch of desert, a group of military vehicles had already surrounded it. Soldiers in tactical gear approached cautiously, their weapons drawn. The pod's door hissed open, and John stumbled out, his clothes torn and his face streaked with soot. He raised his hands in surrender, but his voice was steady. "Take me to your leaders. Now." Hours later, John found himself in a high-tech military facility, seated in a conference room packed with top scientists, military strategists, and political leaders. He wasted no time recounting his story, sparing no detail. At first, the room buzzed with skepticism, until he revealed the broken orb he had taken from the alien ship. When he activated it, the orb projected a hologram of the banquet hall, the host's chilling speech replaying in vivid clarity. Humanity is more than just potential. It is exquisite. The room fell silent. "This isn't just a story," John said, his voice firm. "This is a warning. We're not alone, and they don't see us as equals. They see us as food." What followed was a flurry of activity. Governments united in a way they hadn't in decades, pooling resources to study the orb and analyze the alien technology John had brought back. Scientists reverse-engineered parts of the orb, discovering weaknesses in the Galactic Council's systems. Engineers began developing countermeasures, creating weapons and defenses capable of standing up to an interstellar threat. John became the face of the initiative, a reluctant hero thrust into the spotlight. News networks dubbed him the Banquet survivor, and his story galvanized humanity like never before. Fear turned into determination, and determination turned into action. Months later, as John stood in a massive underground hangar, he surveyed the fruits of their labor. Rows of sleek spacecraft lined the walls, each one equipped with cutting-edge technology derived from the alien orb. Squads of soldiers trained rigorously, their gear designed to counteract the unique abilities of the alien species John had encountered. "This is just the beginning," said Dr. Elaine Marcus, the lead scientist on the project. "The Galactic Council thinks they're invincible. They underestimated us." John nodded. "They always do. But we're not just prey. We're survivors." The day finally came when the Galactic Council made their move. A fleet of alien ships appeared on the outskirts of Earth's solar system, their arrival announced by a broadcast that echoed across every device on the planet. "Humans," the host's voice purred, "we come not in anger, but in tradition. You are part of the galaxy now. Embrace your role, and no harm will come to your world." John stood in the control room of Earth's largest defense station, his jaw clenched. He turned to the gathered leaders, his voice calm but resolute. "They think we'll bow down. Let's show them we've learned how to fight." The battle that followed was unlike anything Earth had ever seen. Alien ships descended, sleek and deadly, their weapons cutting through Earth's atmosphere. But humanity was ready. Earth's new fleet, piloted by brave men and women, met the invaders head-on. The alien technology John had brought back proved invaluable, giving humans an edge the Galactic Council hadn't expected. John himself piloted one of the lead ships, his hand steady on the controls. As he fired on an alien vessel, he couldn't help but think of the Banquet, the terror he'd felt when he realized he was their prey. That fear had transformed into something far more powerful, the will to protect his world. Hours later, as the last alien ship flowed into the depths of space, a cheer erupted across Earth's defenses. Humanity had not just survived. They had won. John stood on the deck of his ship, staring into the endless expanse of stars. He knew this wasn't the end. The Galactic Council would regroup, and there were undoubtedly other threats out there. But for now, Earth was safe. "For now," he murmured, his gaze steely. "Let them come. We'll be ready."